We meet on holy ground, for that place is holy, where lives touch, love moves, hope stirs. How much we need this moment before the eternal, this time to be in reverence before the ultimate, the pause that renews, the interlude that refreshes, the space that gives us room to be. We meet on holy ground, brought into being as life encounters life, as personal histories merge into the communal story, as we take on the pride and pain of our companions, as separate selves become community. How desperate is our need for one another, our silent beckoning to our neighbors, our invitations to share life and death together, our welcome into the lives of those we meet, and their welcome into our own. May our souls capture this treasured time. May our spirits celebrate our meeting in this time and in this space, for we meet on holy ground. Welcome.
We call the east and the element of air, keeper of the breath of life. You enter in at our birth and depart at our death. Be present here at this turning time of year.
We call the south and the elements of fire, keeper of our passion and the memories of our hearts. Be present here and turning time of the year.
We call the west and the element of water, keeper of our tears and our dreams. Be present here at this turning time of the year.
We call the north and the element of earth, keeper of the ancient wisdom of our ancestors. Be present here at this turning time of the year.
We call the center, source of light and darkness, great spirit, spirit of love and life, creator, destroyer, all and void.
Please join us in the lighting of the chalice. The words will appear on the screen. Thank you and good morning. Welcoming all free seekers of truth and meaning, we gather to excite the human spirit, to aspire its growth and development, to respond morally and ethically to a troubled world, and to sustain a vital and nurturing religious community. And I'm Irita London, your service associate for this morning.
Thank you, Irita. This is indeed a turning time of the year. The old year is dying. The evidence is all around us. Leaves are falling, days are shorter, a chillness creeping in. This is indeed a turning time, a time when it is believed by some that the veil between the living and the dead fades and thins, a time when it is believed by some that it is possible for the spirits of our beloved dead to visit us, the living, and for us, we who are the living, to remember them and to send our messages of remembrance, of love, and welcome. In these last days of October and the 1st of November, people across the earth engage in often colorful, frequently fiery celebrations centered around death and dying, and ultimately of rebirth. Celebrations that have been practiced for thousands of years in sacred ritual and story. We may no longer know the origins of these holy days, and no matter what we call them, All Souls Day, All Saints Day, Samhain, All Hallows Eve, Halloween, the fact that we mark this turning time just halfway between summer's end and winter's beginning suggests that it helps us to make sense of our lives, our place in time, and the importance of being in community. Throughout Latin America, in some parts of the American Southwest, and in some of our largest cities, these days are known as Los Días de los Muertos, the days of the dead. They meld rituals associated with Roman Catholic All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day with 2,000-year-old Aztec tradition. Our service today is informed by these holy days, Los Días de los Muertos. Whether or not we believe that spirits dwell in some other realm of existence, this time of the season's turning is a time for remembering. For regardless of our beliefs, those we have loved dwell in our hearts and our minds, and we would remember them. For us Unitarian Universalists, these holy days serve as a reminder that we are part of a larger circle of birth and death, of love and loss, that we are members of a beloved community where we remember and where we will be remembered. Today, then, informed by the holy days, Los Días de los Muertos, our altar is laid with candles and flowers and butterflies, symbols which, according to tradition, show the way to the spirits, and with food, with mandarins and chocolates and pan de muerto, the bread of the dead, which is not gluten-free. All of these sweet things to remind us of all that is sweet about life on this earth. I invite you to sit quietly for a moment, to remember, and when you feel moved, come forward from the floor or from the balcony. There's time to get down here. Say a name and a few words of remembrance. Place a photo or an object, or simply say a name and a few words associated with the person lost. Then take a sweet, take a butterfly, light a candle. There are a few still here. Take a piece of bread, all in recognition of this communion. Let us hold all these beloveds in our hearts and know that there are so many more whose names have not been spoken. let's see, read this. Invite you to read responsively number 720, We Remember Them. The bold letters are for you. Sorry. And I will read the others. Irita will read the bold letters along with you.
In the rising sun and in its going down, we remember them. Please join. In the rising sun,
We remember them.
in the blowing wind, in the blowing of the wind,
Oh, we're off. We're here. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. And then you. Yeah. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. Thanks. Those of you who are faithful readers of the UU World may recall the Hummer Lady. For years, she advertised by this name the bed and breakfast she and her late husband hosted in Sedona, Arizona. While we never stayed there, my friend Jeannie and I made a point of seeing her during our annual trips to Sedona, often since the first late October trip we took to participate in celebrations of the Days of the Dead. The woman who calls herself Hummer Lady is Beth Kingsley Hawkins. She lives in a house surrounded by hummingbird feeders and restful places that invite contemplation of the beauty that surrounds. Beth is a professional photographer, primarily of hummingbirds, but as you will see, of more. People from throughout the Southwest call her and invite her to photograph some of the unusual places where hummingbirds live. The first time Jeannie and I visited Beth, we three Unitarian Universalists stood on her roof overlooking one of the sacred sites of the Sedona area. The U.S. Forest Service website describes the vista before which we stood as, and I quote, one of the most photographed scenes in the Southwest, towering Cathedral Rock, reflected in the waters of Oak Creek at Red Rock Crossing. It is a spectacularly beautiful spot. As we stood there in awe, I mentioned how enthralled I was by preparations for the Days of the Dead that were taking place in Sedona. The local paper had reported of preparations begun weeks before about the ofrendas, the altars in homes and in public spaces upon which would be placed food and flowers, candles and photographs of people and pets who had died. Treasured objects, valued because they had belonged to their beloveds. All of these things, invitations to those who had died to come home for a time so that we, the living, might express our love and gratitude and share our stories. Vendors had been decorating shop windows with smiling pastel-painted skulls, figurines carved in wood or shaped in clay of ghouls and zombies engaged in all sorts of everyday activities, of musicians jamming, dancers dancing, jack-o'-lanterns, jewelry, and other accoutrements, such as spiders and spider webs, that would aid in marking this brief time, this turning time, when the veil between the living and the dead would be thinnest, of this time when grief might be turned to acceptance. As we stood on that roof in Sedona, I had remarked how touched I was by the preparations, as I just said, and how much I looked forward to being there to witness the street performers, the jugglers, the stilt and fire dancers, entire families dressed in costumes, faces painted white, women in veils, and men dressed as caballeros, as Mexican gentlemen, to hear the music and perhaps to participate by lighting a candle in memory of one I loved who had died. Why on earth would you want to celebrate the days of the dead? Our hostess had exclaimed. I can't stand the skeletons and skulls that are everywhere these days. Signs of these days were indeed ubiquitous. On the sign over the check-in area of Southwest Airlines at Sky Harbor Airport in Phoenix lay a smiling skeleton draped in a position akin to the odalisque. It was only slightly unnerving at check-in time. But the days of the dead are to help us to come to terms with death, perhaps even to laugh, I had responded. The conversation soon turned. We left the house and went for a long walk along Oak Creek. We had returned and were drinking tea in the house when suddenly Beth, she who had expressed no appreciation for rituals, signs, or symbols associated with the days of the dead, she who had had time to reflect on our earlier brief conversation, stood and blurted, "I have to show you something." She left the room and soon returned carrying a photograph, although we couldn't see the image, which was turned toward her. Standing there, holding that frame, she began telling us about the day she had received permission from a circus company to photograph the raising of 3 of their big tents. At the end of the photo session, she stayed to watch the opening acts, one of which was a clown with a life-sized skeleton attached to his back. Each time the clown took a step, the skeleton took a step. Each time the clown turned his head to look over his shoulder, he would see the skeleton and quicken his pace. So, of course, did the skeleton quicken his pace. The clown slowed, and the skeleton slowed. The clown ducked, so did the skeleton. The clown sped up, so did the skeleton. No matter what the clown did, the skeleton was right there behind him. Everyone was laughing, almost in tears, Beth said, and then added nostalgically, "It wasn't until he'd left the arena that it occurred to me that the clown had had us all laughing at our fear of death." She went on, I decided I wanted to photograph him, so I went to the dressing tent. He was there, but had already taken the skeleton off his back. I introduced myself and told him why I'd come. Graciously, he agreed to put the costume, the skeleton, back on his back, and soon came out to where I was waiting. Beth continued. Usually people I photograph ask what I want them to do. He did not. He just began posing. At first, as before, it seemed as if he didn't notice death at his back. Then he became aware. He would turn toward the skeleton and try to get away. He would look over his shoulder and look frightened, and then angry, then almost resigned. He shrugged, his palms turned upward, a look of, I give, on his face. I suddenly realized that he was acting, posing the stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, acceptance. You know how he did acceptance? She asked. He lifted the skeleton off his back, turned around to face it, placed one of his hands on its spine, then took one of its bony hands in his and began to dance. Beth then turned the frame she had been holding toward Jeannie and me, and there was a photograph of that clown in painted face and floppy shoes dancing with death. That's what the Days of the Dead are about, to help us to accept the inevitable, that we will and do lose those we love, and ultimately that we too will go. But Los Días de los Muertos are different from Halloween, in which death is seen as threatening. These days are about honoring, celebrating, and remembering, affirming, as Peter Morales, former president of the UUA, wrote several years ago, and I quote, affirming our connections across all of time. When we allow ourselves to feel our place along the continuum of life and death, it moves us deeply. Facing death sharpens our sense of being alive and our connections to one another. And the dead help to remind us of what is most meaningful and joyous in the world. Ultimately, then, Los Días de los Muertos celebrate life. So may it be. We hold in our hearts all who need our love and support. Those who are in pain, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. We hold in our hearts those who celebrate attendance and production in theaters, achievement, leadership in school, the arrival of a new puppy, and the rites of life, celebrating birthdays and marriage, as we hold today the memories of those no longer with us. We hold in our hearts as well all who are harmed, all who have been harmed in endless war, from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in the Ukraine, in Israel, and Gaza. As members of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity, we express our hope for peace and justice one day here at home and among all nations. Amen. Our closing words are from Tecumseh. So live your life, so the fear of death does not enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion. Respect others in their views, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and of service to your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give a word or sign of salute when meeting or passing a stranger if in a lonely place. Show respect to all people, but grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the light, for your life and strength. Give thanks for your food and for the joy of living. And when your time comes to die, sing your death song and die like a hero going home. Amen.
Please read along as we extinguish the chalice. The words are on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of the community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Okay, we have in your order of service, there are some announcements, but we have an extra one. That is not there. Are there any announcements on Zoom?
We have no announcements from Zoom.
So the announcement that's not in your order of service, come join us for fun on Tuesday, November 7th, Election Day, at Albany UU while we peel and cut up apples for the pies we will be selling in time for Thanksgiving. We start at 9 p.m. and usually finish, oh my gosh. What am I thinking? We start at 9 a.m. I hope that's not a sign of the future. And we finish by 11:30 a.m. Bring your favorite peeler and/or knife and join us. Contact Barb Manny or Sandy Stone with any questions after the service. And reminder, that's in your order of service, please avoid use of strong perfumes and scents. And the flowers are in memory of Jackie Williams, a longtime member of the congregation. That concludes our service for today. Thank you.